I'm tired. Why are you treating me like this?
Amelia stood in the doorway of the house she had cleaned, cooked in, and cried in for 6 years, listening to her mother-in-law call her selfish one more time. "You're only serving yourself," the older woman spat, arms crossed, blocking the hallway like she still owned every inch of it. Amelia did not lower her eyes the way she used to. "Yes," she said. "From today, I'm choosing myself first." Her husband didn't even look up from his phone. "Serve your husband," her mother-in-law snapped. "He has 2 hands." Amelia almost laughed. "If he wants breakfast, he knows where the food is." What none of them understood, not her husband, not the woman who had humiliated her for years, was that Amelia had already made a phone call that morning that would change everything about who needed whom in that house. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how Amelia Bennett arrived at that doorway, calm enough to say no for the first time in 6 years, you have to understand what those 6 years had actually cost her. She married James Whitmore at 24, young and hopeful, believing the warmth she saw in him during their courtship would carry into the home they built together. Instead, she moved into a house already ruled by his mother, Margaret, a woman who treated obedience as the only acceptable currency a daughter-in-law could offer. Amelia cooked every meal, cleaned every room, and absorbed every insult with a silence she mistook for strength. She told herself patience was a virtue worth holding on to. She did not yet understand the difference between patience and disappearing. The first 2 years were difficult but bearable, the kind of difficult Amelia believed every new wife endured before earning her place. Margaret criticized her cooking, her clothing, the way she walked through the house too quietly or too loudly depending on the day. James rarely intervened, telling Amelia privately that his mother simply needed time to warm up to her, that arguing would only make things worse. Amelia believed him, because believing him was easier than accepting how alone she truly was in that house. She threw herself into her work as a hospital administrator instead, arriving early and leaving late, finding in her career the respect and competence she could not find at home. Her supervisor, a woman named Grace Whitfield, noticed her dedication long before anyone in that house ever did. Everything changed in Amelia's 3rd year of marriage, during a pregnancy she had wanted desperately. She began experiencing complications in her 7th month, sharp pain and dangerous bleeding that sent her into a panic one evening while home alone with Margaret. She begged Margaret to call James, to take her to the hospital immediately, but Margaret insisted the pain was nothing more than a woman being dramatic, that she should simply endure it without complaint. By the time James finally returned home hours later and rushed Amelia to the hospital, it was too late. Amelia lost the child that night, a loss the doctors told her plainly could have been prevented with earlier care. She never fully recovered from the silence that followed, the way no one in that house ever said they were sorry. In the years after that loss, something in Amelia went quiet in a different way than before, not the quiet of obedience, but the quiet of a woman calculating exactly how much longer she could survive a house that had never once protected her. Margaret never apologized, choosing instead to blame Amelia's own body for what happened. James grieved privately, but never once held his mother accountable, telling Amelia it was easier for everyone to simply move forward. Then, 8 months ago, Amelia discovered a woman named Charlotte had been visiting James during the hours Amelia worked late shifts at the hospital, a discovery Margaret had known about for weeks and chosen to protect rather than reveal. When Amelia finally confronted Charlotte directly, the other woman laughed in her face and told her to leave other people's husbands alone, as though Amelia were the intruder in her own marriage. Amelia did not scream. She did not break dishes or demand a confrontation in front of the family the way 6 years earlier she might have believed she needed to. She simply went to work the next morning and told Grace Whitfield everything, not asking for sympathy, but asking a single practical question. Was the regional director position Grace had mentioned months earlier still available? Grace had been quietly hoping Amelia would ask that question for over a year, having watched her run departments more efficiently than administrators twice her salary. Grace told her yes, immediately, and asked only one thing in return: that Amelia stop underestimating herself the way this family clearly had been teaching her to for years. That conversation planted a seed Amelia had been too afraid to water until that exact moment. For the next several months, Amelia continued living in that house exactly as she always had, cooking, cleaning, absorbing Margaret's daily insults, all while quietly preparing an entirely different life no one in that home knew existed. She interviewed for the regional director position twice, took online certification courses late at night after everyone else had gone to sleep, and slowly began transferring savings into an account Margaret had no knowledge of. She told no one, not even James, understanding by then that revealing her plans too early would only give this family time to sabotage what she had worked so hard to build. She kept her notebook of hospital financial reports hidden the same way she once hid her tears, learning that survival in that house required her to become someone capable of holding two entirely separate lives at once. The morning everything changed began like any other, with Margaret demanding breakfast be ready before she had even left her bedroom, and James scrolling through his phone at the table without acknowledging Amelia's presence beyond a distracted nod. But that morning, Amelia's phone rang before sunrise, and on the other end was Grace Whitfield, congratulating her on being formally selected as regional director, effective immediately, with a salary nearly triple what she currently earned and full relocation support to the new regional office 200 miles away. Amelia thanked her calmly, hung up, and stood in her kitchen for a long moment simply breathing, understanding that the woman who answered that phone call was no longer the same woman who had once begged Margaret to call an ambulance and been ignored. When Margaret emerged from her room and found Amelia still standing quietly in the kitchen instead of cooking, the criticism came instantly and predictably. "You're only serving yourself," Margaret said, arms crossed in the doorway, the same posture she had used for 6 years to make Amelia feel smaller than she was. Amelia looked at her for a long moment, calm in a way that visibly unsettled the older woman. "Yes," Amelia said simply. "From today, I'm choosing myself first." Margaret's voice sharpened immediately. "Serve your husband. He has 2 hands." Amelia almost laughed at how small that instruction sounded now, compared to everything she had survived to reach this particular morning. "If he wants breakfast," she said, "he knows where the food is." Margaret's fury escalated quickly once she realized Amelia was not backing down the way she always had before. She accused Amelia of treating her badly, of being a bad daughter-in-law who had never once shown proper respect, twisting 6 years of Amelia's silent suffering into an accusation aimed back at her. Charlotte, who had been quietly waiting in the living room for James that morning, added her own cruelty to the moment, telling Amelia to leave other people's husbands alone and go back to her own house, promising to humiliate her someday for daring to still exist in that space. Amelia turned to her without raising her voice. "I am not going anywhere," she said, "until I am ready to. And today I am ready." Margaret called her shameless and useless, the way she always did when losing control of a room she believed she still owned. Amelia's phone rang again just as the shouting reached its peak, and she answered it calmly in front of all 3 of them, letting the silence of the room amplify every word. "Yes, I'm on my way," she said simply, then ended the call. James finally looked up from his phone, curious despite himself. "Who was that?" he asked. Amelia met his eyes for the first time that entire morning. "Someone who knows my worth," she said, and walked toward the bedroom to finish packing the single suitcase she had prepared the night before. Margaret, sensing something had shifted beyond her control, ordered Amelia to tidy the house before leaving, threatening to slap her if she kept talking back the way she suddenly seemed capable of doing. Amelia set her suitcase down at the door and turned to face Margaret fully for what she already knew would be the last time in that house. "Respect yourself," Amelia said quietly, "or I will hit you with this shoe if you ever raise your hand to me again." The threat was not one Margaret expected from the woman she had spent 6 years training into silence. Amelia's voice cracked only once, when she finally said what she had never allowed herself to say aloud since the night she lost her child. "Wicked man," she said, turning to James. "You let her decide whether I deserved to go to hospital, and our child paid for it. I have carried that alone for 3 years while you all moved on like nothing happened." The room went completely silent for the first time that morning. James stepped forward, finally attempting to intervene, but Amelia raised a hand gently, not in anger, simply in finality. "I have to take care of this," she said, meaning the suitcase, the new position, the entire life waiting for her 200 miles away that none of them had been invited into. She walked out of that house with the same quiet composure she had walked in with 6 years earlier, except this time, the silence belonged entirely to her. Neighbors who had watched Amelia endure that household for years later said the same thing to each other, that she had finally chosen herself after everyone in that house treated her like something disposable rather than someone worth protecting. Amelia did not look back as she reached the car Grace had sent to collect her. 2 years later, Amelia ran her regional division from a modern office 200 miles from the house that once tried to convince her she was worth nothing beyond what she could serve on a breakfast table. She rebuilt slowly, deliberately, the way she had once memorized hospital budgets late at night while everyone around her slept. She did not seek revenge against Margaret, James, or Charlotte, understanding that the best answer to years of being made small was simply to become someone they could no longer reach. Occasionally, she still thought about the child she lost, carrying that grief quietly the way she carried everything, but she no longer carried it alone in silence inside a house that never once protected her. Amelia had finally learned the difference between patience and disappearing, and she never confused the two again. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose yourself after years of being told that choice was selfish? Tell us what gave you the courage to finally walk away. And if this story moved you, wait until you hear what happened when a daughter-in-law returned 5 years later, not to forgive, but to remind an entire family exactly who they had once discarded. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.